Welcome back to the Farmstead Forum Podcast, your southern hub for all things homesteading. Come join us today as we talk about the fascinating topic of meat rabbits. We'll be discussing breeding, kit care, infrastructure, important considerations, and much more. Grab your cup of coffee, have a seat, and stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the Farmstead Forum Podcast, your southern hub for all things homesteading. Today, we are talking about New Zealand meat rabbits. We'll be talking a little bit on quality, sustainability, breeding, feed care, basically your run-of-the-mill meat rabbit intro. So my name is Emily. I'm your host, and I am the founder of Farmstead Forum, and we have a small 2-acre homestead in Georgia, northwest Georgia. So we picked meat rabbits for our homestead because they're small, they're quiet, they're really easy to contain in these raised cages. So we had several reasons for picking meat rabbits. So I wanted to talk a little bit about their housing. Some people will say to, put them in a colony style. We don't practice that type of husbandry because mainly I want to control when the breeding occurs. I think it puts them in a high stress environment when they're all together in one big cage. So, we separate them. It's also, they're very territorial. So if you have some rabbits that are very aggressive, they will take chunks out of each other. I mean, it's very possible for them to injure each other because of them trying to breed or having kits and being, protective. Kits are baby rabbits, for those of you who don't know the lingo. So you do want a space wherever you decide to put them that's well ventilated. So, we have a lot of airflow out here. Some people have them in a barn and like a covered area, but as long as there's airflow and ventilation, that helps because rabbits are prone to breathing issues. They're prone to heavy smells and that kind of thing. You also want them to be on the south-facing side of your house because if there's a lot of sun, they can't take a lot of heat. So we have put them kind of in our tree line. I'll swing you guys around so you can see. So this is our shed. It's our house. So our shed, and we have put them on the south side of this shed. So it's just kind of a nice shaded area. They don't have as much heat stress. You can leave, as far as like the pens, you can keep babies together until they are about 12 weeks when they're harvesting weight. And the moms, usually I will keep with the babies until they're about 8 weeks old, and then I'll wean the babies, the kits. So, you can run out of space pretty quickly when you're breeding rabbits or meat. I will just say you need at least, like for instance, to have 5 cages, and that's just to get started. I mean, we have 2 breeder does and 1 buck. That's really what you need to have a good standard supply of meat production, depending on how aggressive your breeding program is. But so we started with 5 cages, and you have to kind of do the rabbit shuffle sometimes, depending on if you're breeding or if you're, in a folding pattern, or if the weather's too hot. All those can affect how much you breed. Their water, you need clean, fresh water daily. That's the most important thing. I think sometimes I have to water twice a day because, especially the nursing moms, they'll run out of water, and then the kits start drinking the water. So you want to make sure that they have plenty of fresh water. There's different hacks for that. Some people use like a big igloo water cooler, and then they do gravity down to nipples on a PEX line. Something like that could work if you're trying to keep it low maintenance. But I have these little watering dispensers, which you can get from Tractor Supply or your local feed store, but you don't have to use those. In fact, in the freeze, like we have a freeze that's about to come through Georgia, and it's not convenient with using these watering dispensers because they often freeze, bust, and they're not cheap. They're probably about $12 a pop. So just keep that in mind. We do move over to bowls when it gets that cold. So I have metal bowls that I'll put it out here, and you just have to, change them out more periodically because they'll tip them over. They're just a mess when there's bowls in there. During hot weather, you have to think more about rabbits' health because they do not do well in the heat. And most people worry about them during the wintertime, but they have fur coats. God gave them those for a reason, and they really do well in the winter. And most people breed in the wintertime for that reason. But the heat you have to worry about, especially in, we have 90 to 100 degrees in Northwest Georgia, and rabbits go sterile over 90 degrees, I believe. The males go sterile. So not just that, but they, start breeding faster and they get very heated easily. So you want to make sure some people even have, if you're in a hot climate, some people even have a, big fan blowing towards the cages. And another thing I didn't mention, with these cages being off the ground, it also helps lower their risk for parasites as well as predators. If they're close to the house, the predators are less likely to come closer to the house, like coyotes, raccoons. We've had a couple up near the house, but we have dogs in the yard, so that I haven't had any predator pressure with them being raised up in these cages. So that's another bonus. Okay, so I was going to talk a little bit about the feed. They do need a balanced diet. We use something called Nature's Crest. It's a non-GMO rabbit pellet. That's their main source of feed. And some people will do hay. I have found personally that when I put a lot of hay in the cages, that it decreases the sanitary factor because the hay collects on the bottom, they poop and pee on the bottom, and then it just cakes on top of each other and it's less sanitary. And as far as what else you can give them, I have a lot of privet growing around our cages and in our yard. It's an invasive Asian plant. So I give them privet, and I've actually read that the bark and just the different plants can help decrease their risk for parasites in the cages. So I give them privet kind of interspersed. I don't give it to them every day, but I do put several big branches of privet in there per cage. The babies, the kits will nibble on it too. So it's a good source. And then, of course, the leaves of the privet are very nutritious in vitamins, and they just eat it up. The moms, especially, if they're nursing or just had a litter, they will like be aggressive trying to grab it from you as you put it in the cage. They also need fiber, which is key for digestion. So the foraging, with the privet, garden treats, greens from your garden, you can definitely give them a lot of fiber that way. Hay is another way to give them fiber. Timothy hay, alfalfa, they're both very nutritious. I've just had a hard time sourcing those locally that was not sprayed. So if I'm going to put something in my garden, they're manure, which is great for the garden. If I'm going to use that, I don't want anything that's been sprayed on there. I don't want to mix that with the manure. So those are just things that you have to think about depending on what you're eating. About the feed, do not give them too many apples. They will love it, but then especially the babies, they will look so cute and you're feeding it to them and they'll eat as many as you put in there. But later they get runny bowel movement and then their fur mat around where they pee from, and you will have something called poopy butt. And I don't know what else to call it, but I had about 8 kits one time that had poopy butt, and I had to bring them inside, give them a bath with a toothbrush and soapy water, and it was a mess. So don't give them too many sweets. And I would say maybe a handful of greens per day is more than enough. So like if you have some scraps from your garden or from your kitchen, and you want to bring them out, that's probably fine. I've given them carrot tops. They love the tops, not just the carrot. They actually don't eat a whole lot of carrots, kind of ironic, but definitely the tops. They eat different herbs. They've eaten my rosemary. They do not need honeysuckle. Honeysuckle is toxic, so there's some foraging plants that you'll need to look up before you decide to give those to your rabbit. I made a mistake one time of giving honeysuckle, and I found out that it was toxic. That rabbit had a miscarriage, but I don't know if it was the honeysuckle or if it was because I didn't know she was pregnant. I left the kits, the brothers and sisters, too long in the same cage. They get fertile around 4 months, 3 to 4 months. So that's why most people try to process them around 12 weeks, because that way they're not breeding age and you don't have to worry so much about separating the male from female. But anyway, so just be careful what you're giving them to eat if you're picking things apart. Okay, let's talk about breeding, because this is something, there's some misconceptions about you take the male to the female to the male. They're very territorial, especially the females. So you want to take the female and put her in the male's cage. And you don't want to leave her in there like for days at a time, because she can get so aggressive towards the male that she literally bites off some body parts. We'll just say that. I've heard of stories of that happening. And I will say the most aggressive I've seen my female get while in there trying to breed her has been like scratching and like just up around the cage. But usually after about 3 or 4, what I call fall off, literally how you know that the breeding is successful, the male will mount the back of the female, and she's usually just all the way on the ground, on the floor of the cage, and he will kind of raise up and then just fall over. That's how you know you had a successful breeding. So that's one successful breeding. I would try to get at least 3 of those if you're going to leave them together, and then take her out, put her back in her cage, and give her a treat. When you're deciding which rabbit to breed, I would pick the healthier one, like your bigger females. If you're going for a color variation, I wanted a solid brown color when I first started breeding meat rabbits. So I'll say, I had some mutt rabbits. They were sold to me as New Zealand, and I was told, oh, it doesn't matter what, if they're purebred or if they're registered, as long as they're New Zealand, that's fine for meat breeding. I submit to you, it does matter, because my mutt rabbits did not get big compared to my New Zealands that I have now. And I will tell you how I know. I kept some solid brown rabbits that I had in my mutt rabbit. I kept a breeder pair, and then I also got a new pair, a white buck and a black doe, which I still have both of them. And they were not registered, but they were purebred New Zealand, solid color. The male, the buck, had pink eyes, pink ears. That's how you know when they have the pink eyes, it's purebred. And I raised them, I bred them at the same time. They delivered within a day or two. Does delivered within a day or two of each other. And then I compared the size of the kits. It was double the size. The purebred New Zealands versus my mutt rabbits, literally double. So when somebody tells you it doesn't matter, they're not breeding for meat quality or to raise a higher weighing meat rabbit by processing times. They don't know what they're talking about. Okay, so we talked about focusing on genetics. You can also breed for temperament. So if you have a more aggressive female, you don't like that, maybe pick a breeder doe from a nicer female. The females get very aggressive. I mean, I can't tell you how many scratches I've had from these. They think they're so sweet, they're cute and cuddly. No, they can scratch your eyes out and draw blood. So just be careful, wear gloves, long sleeves whenever you're tending to your meat rabbits. Some people breed Californians. There's also Rex rabbits, which have prize manure. There's also a silver fox I've heard of. Those are the main ones. New Zealand's are easy to come by. It's easy to find new stock when you need it. I would say I have not seen anybody local selling Californians. You might find, if you're looking for a specific breed that you can't find, look for at your local extension office or ag center. There might be a rabbit show at the ag center that you can, find people and ask them questions if they sell some of their rabbits. You might be able to find them that way. Okay. Let's talk about and if you want more than 2 does as far as breeding, I think 1 buck can service up to 8 does, if I recall correctly. So you really only need 1 male. You don't need more than that. Okay. And also, as far as timing when you breed, rabbits are kind of always in heat. If they're not in heat, the first time that successfully mounts her, that will like throw her into a heat cycle. And that's why you breed them a couple times each mating. And it takes anywhere from 29 to 32 days for the kits to deliver. And so literally about 30 days, I count 29 days from when I breed, and then I put the nesting box in. I don't put a nesting box in there all the time because your rabbits, your does will use those as litter boxes, and I don't want to create an unsanitary situation for the rabbits. The mother nurses her kits as soon as they're born. She starts to nurse them, and she only nurses them twice a day. So you may think, why is she not in there? Why do I never see her nursing? They only nurse twice a day. So don't worry unless, the kit's little tummy doesn't look full, and then it might not be getting milk. But if there's something wrong with the kit, the mom will eat the kit, or, if it's not moving, I would make sure that you're checking daily for when the doe pulls her fur, because she'll pull the neck fur off of her chest and prepare her nesting box. I always put hay in there. You want to put hay in the box and then some extra hay outside of the box, like a couple handfuls, so that she can, make a little nest in there. And then the day that she delivers is usually the same day she will pull her fur. So when I'm coming out here and checking these boxes, I'm looking for the fur. And let me show you guys what that looks like, because I have one just delivered yesterday. Okay, let's see. Not sure if you can see it, but this is Night Fury. She is a very temperamental mom. She will charge you if you go in there. But in her nesting box, not sure if you can see it, but right there in the corner, I can see her black fur. So I know that she has just delivered. My purebred New Zealand that I was telling y'all that I changed stock recently, and then I also just gave her some privet treats this morning, and she's still enjoying that. But she's definitely a good breeder, I would say, because she has big kits, and so far, she's been a good mom, too. I haven't had her, have anything suspicious as far as not taking care of her kit.
Before we continue, I want to remind you that all of the show notes and resources mentioned in today's episode are available on our website at farmsteadforum.com. If you're finding value in this content, please take a moment to like this episode and subscribe to the Farmstead Forum podcast on YouTube and Spotify. It truly helps support the show. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date on the upcoming episodes, events, and everything happening with Farmstead Forum. Thanks so much for being here and for supporting this community.
I'm referring to my notes so I stay on track, you guys. So we talked about when she actually delivers, you check the kit, make sure that the box is staying clean, as far as you don't want there to be a dead kit in there with the others. It might cause some disease issues. Around 7 days, I would change out the hay in her nesting box, put fresh hay in there, try to save as much of the fur as you can. There may be some poop in there. That's okay, as far as you don't have to worry about that, because the babies will actually eat their mother's pellets of poop in the nesting box. They will, within a week, they go and find it inside the nesting box, and that helps get their gut microbiome kind of jump started. I know it's gross thinking about them eating their mother's poop, but that's what they do. That's how God made them. So the reason you change the hay out that week after delivery is because the hay predisposes rabbits to this crusty eye infection. And so when you change it out at a week, usually you don't have that issue. It's like a bacterial infection. You can use, if you have paper feed bags, or if you mill your own grains and you have those Azure paper bags, you can shred those and use those as bedding for your nesting boxes. That's just another idea and a good way to recycle. But besides that, as far as having to help with the kits after they're born, the mom does everything. I don't have to worry about anything besides just changing the nesting box out after a week. And mom nurses them, shows them what to do. They start learning. They start eating the pellets. These rabbits are about 6 to 8 weeks old now, and they can transition to wean at 8 weeks. And I can take I can take them out. This one, she's a little better. Sometimes she's still New Zealand's are not eating cuddly rabbits. Like they're more likely to scratch you or be jumpy. I'm trying to get one in. I have had some escape and jump down out of the cages. They were okay. It was a matter of catching them. That was another story. But this one is about 6 to 8 weeks old, and you can see how cute he is or she. I haven't sexed them yet. They're hard to sex when they're this little because they all kind of look the same. That's a whole other issue. Doing that, I would have to do another video probably to cover it. But they are really hands off. I mean, they're great moms, and you really don't have to do anything with them. Side note: if you're trying to sell rabbits at a farmer's market, I would just tell you they're a huge kid magnet. Parents will have to stop and talk to you to see what else you're selling because of the rabbit. So I have found that whenever I'm doing a vendors event, I take baby rabbits with me because they're a great attraction for kids. And of course, the kids get a little sad when they find out we eat them, but I try not to talk about that. But side note that if you want to contain them when they're this little, you can stuff them down inside of a sock and it holds them perfectly. They don't poop and pee on the kid. They're not scratching the kid, and everybody's happy. So, and the rabbit just kind of sits there like a little bunny burrito. They're super cute. I would say they fit better in a sock when they're about 2 to 4 weeks old. This one's a little big to fit in a sock, but huge popularity with the kids. And if you're gonna sell them as pets, you probably would pick a different breed. I would say that New Zealand just are not super used to being held unless that's you come out and hold them every day. I will say when I got my two breeder New Zealands, the back and the doe, that they were very docile compared to mine because mine just don't get held a lot. So you can, if you hold them and they're used to you, they can get less aggressive. So I will just say that. But so these are almost ready to wean. They're eating the pellets. I haven't given them any hay. They have gotten some privet, I'm sure, when I've given the mom some privet. But these are ready to wean. And something else I forgot to mention. If you hold them with their head down like this, they get very sleepy. Well, they get more calm usually. Kind of like a chicken. When you hold them upside down by the feet, they go to sleep. So if you're ever trying to clip their nails, which I don't usually have to do, but if they're in cages, it's something to consider that you might need to clip their nails. You want to hold them kind of upside down like that with their head down. Okay, so I talked about the weaning time for the kits. You also don't want to change their diet drastically because they can be more prone to have loose stools and get dehydrated. So just be aware of that. Okay, we talked about hygiene issues, parasites, especially if they're on the ground, respiratory issues, so you want a well-ventilated space. I try to keep their poop chute. This down here, I don't know if you guys can see it very good. You see that galvanized steel chute? That catches all the manure, so I can sweep it down with a shovel into a 5-gallon bucket and then take it down to the garden. You want to keep it clean so there's less odors and ammonia smell. Rabbit manure is great because you can put it straight on your garden. It will not burn your plants. You should add manure when you're in like the planting phase, not when you're harvesting plants. So just a side note, you don't want to add fresh manure, even though it won't hurt the plants when you're about to eat something that you're putting manure and compost around. It contaminates plants. So, anyways, also the type of cages that you decide to buy, I would say they need to be like designated rabbit cages. Rabbits are prone to something called sore hocks. It's where their feet get issues and sores because you didn't use the right type of wire gauge or it's not running correctly on the bottom. So these cages I got were from a feed store. I got one black, like wire coated cage from Tractor Supply. It was not good quality. I unfortunately don't recommend to buy it from there. And then I did get another cage that was a bird cage. Got that from a store that was going out of business. And I put it on its side. So it was nice and tall, but what I needed was more floor space for these grow out kits. So I put it on its side. So it still had plenty of height for the bird cage, but I put it on its side and it just worked out. I'll show you guys that before we hop off here. Okay, so I already kind of told you guys why I picked New Zealand rabbit, but as far as processing and the meat, they have a really good meat to bone ratio, so they're great for that reason. As far as how much feed they eat, converting that to meat, they also produce more protein per ounce of meat than any other meat that I know of, just about. And they're high in B12. Some people look at them more as a red meat rather than, even though they taste like chicken. Everything, some things taste like chicken, but rabbits really do. Any recipe that you have use chicken, you can use rabbit meat as a substitute. And you don't even have to use as much because they're such high protein that they fill you up faster. They don't need to be your only source of protein. I will say that because you can get a protein deficiency. They're not a complete protein, so you can get some sort of health deficiency if you only consume rabbit meat. You didn't have like eggs or cow, chicken, venison, some other type of protein along with the rabbit meat. I might do a whole podcast on rabbit processing because I think it's a whole thing in itself. We do process our own rabbits, like I said, around 12 to 14 weeks, or excuse me, 12 to 16 weeks, depending on when we get the time to do it. Uh, but they're typically around 4 to 5 pounds during the 12 to 16 week mark. So that's why we process during that time. But we do it humanely. We don't shoot them. We dislocate their neck and then their body just kind of shuts down. But we do it in a humane way. And then we freeze them after that. So, side note, the first time we processed rabbits, so I have three boys. Two of them are old enough to know what's going on when we process, and now they're involved in helping. So that's great. But the first time we processed the rabbits, I told my oldest, Reagan, he was 8 at the time, I said, yeah, buddy, we're about to process the rabbits. We're about to harvest them. And he said, oh, okay. I said, yeah, we're gonna harvest the babies. He said, eat the babies? I said, yeah, buddy. I mean, we're not gonna harvest the parents because we need them to keep making more babies. I said, but we're not gonna harvest them till they're older. He said, oh, okay. And then he said something, and I said, no, we're gonna put them in the freezer. And he said, put them in the freezer? And I said, not when they're alive. Like we're gonna put them in there when we've already harvested them and they're dead. And he just was like, oh, but it was hilarious because it was all about, oh my gosh, they're babies. Why would you do that? He just didn't understand it. It was kind of funny. Okay. And also, side note, kids, like, involve them when you're processing. Totally. They need to know where their food comes from. I mean, it's something we're so far disconnected in our society from where our food comes from. Kids need to know where that chicken comes from on their plate. And for us, the rabbits, the boys help with watering them, feeding them. They help on processing day because they use the hide, the feet, the head, and some of the organ meat. We try to create less waste when we're harvesting, each kind of nose to tail. So they use all of those body parts for dog treats. We'll dehydrate them at 155 for 24 hours. And after that, we sell them at a local Thai mercantile for the boys to get a little money. And they get all of that money, and they're so excited whenever they pick up their check. But they help with tying up the hides for the rabbit treats, and with dehydrating them, they help with all of that. And it's been a great thing for them to learn. They're starting to be little entrepreneurs. So, okay, so we talked a little bit about processing, and as far as challenges with the meat rabbit, I would say space is our biggest challenge. It's real easy to run out of space quickly if you're not careful with your breeding. You're having to keep everybody separate pretty much, except for your grow outfit. And rewards, I would say having non-GMO meat that I know where it came from, The manure is priceless. It grows great big veggies in my garden. I have some green onions that I put in a potato bag, and those onions got 18 inches tall and like a quarter size around. I mean, it's huge, huge produce. So it's a great, wonderful manure for composting. I think it's great for our family doing things like harvesting them together. Just, I would say the quality that it adds to us as spending time as a family, but also knowing where that food came from is priceless to me. Also, of course, being self-sufficient. I would say rabbits are a good option because I don't depend on a feed store to get baby rabbits. You have to depend on the feed store for baby chicks or, you know, um, some of the breeding companies like the Murray Hatchery. Some years they don't have enough stock and you have to order your chicks in time, so you may not be able to raise chickens that year. So that's definitely something to consider with rabbits. It's like a self-sustaining thing. You don't even have to think about ordering, you know, babies. They just breed like rabbits, so to speak. I would say another challenge would be the weather and having to be more vigilant with breeding, timing, you know, with the weather, especially in our southern climate. So that is a deterrent as far as heat. But all around, easily manageable, strategic where you go. Key point, just recapping, I would say be strategic about your infrastructure starting out. Make sure you have plenty of space because you will outgrow it. We kind of jumped in here. We planted these, we built this frame before we bought the cages, and the cages are too wide for the frame. So that creates some spillover of the pellets, you know, outside the poop chute. The things like that, I think we could have planned it a little bit differently if we had bought the cages first, then built the structure around that. So infrastructure first, water is super important, twice a day, especially in our hot climate in the south. Their feed, you know, mostly pellet, but you can give them some forage hay if you want to, preferably hay that hasn't been sprayed with Grazon or anything like that, that will ruin your garden. Talked about breeding, about timing with that, keeping them separate, and how long to leave them together. We talked about pit care as far as what to do with their nesting box. And I forgot to tell you, take their nesting box out of the cage at 4 weeks. That will also decrease your risk of diseases and cleanliness in the cage. So just take it out after 4 weeks. They're big enough. They're not going to squeeze through the holes in the cage or anything. And you do want to clean your cages periodically. Some people clean them in between each litter. I find it hard and not practical for me to do that. So I clean them at least once or twice a year. I have had some issues with the livers on some of my meat rabbits. I'm having white spots, so I don't save those livers. The meat's perfectly fine to eat despite that. But I have noticed that when the cleanliness is lacking as much in the cages as I would want to, that I have had some issues with parasites or what I suspect is parasites. That's the way the liver looks. So you do want to clean them periodically. I would say ideally three times a year, but definitely I would say that that's just some highlights for recapping what we've talked about. So a few tips for new rabbit raisers. Just start small. Just get one buck, one doe. Just keep them alive, feed them. It's a whole thing getting used to keeping livestock alive. I would say just make sure that you have what it takes to, start small. That way, if you fail small. When I had poopy butt issues with my new rabbits, I had only 8 rabbits to clean. If I had 2 does with 2 litters at the same time, I could have been dealing with 16 to 20 rabbits of cleaning poopy butt, and that would have been a nightmare. So just start small, and that way, if it doesn't work out, it's easy to get out of it and you haven't invested a whole lot of money. If you guys have questions, feel free to drop a comment down below in the video. I did promise you guys I'm going to take you to see the ground cage while I have you on here. I hope you guys can hear me because this is the first time I've used this little portable mic. Here's my poop chute. So I just sweep it all down with my shovel here into the bucket. And I'll usually get 2 buckets at a time and take them down to the garden and just put them out on my beds that I'm not using. So this is my ground cage. this was a bird cage that we converted into a rabbit cage. I have a divider. You may not be able to see it. I have a divider down the middle of the cage because this is a male. This is my breeder buck, and that's a female kit that's ready to be processed. I just haven't had the time to do her yet. We did like 5 the other night, and now we have to do 4 more. So it takes a couple hours, even though we've got it down to a science. But anyway, so we took this bird cage and laid it down, flat, because it is supposed to be upright. And we had the idea so this was like a tray that went down in here. The tray slid down. We took that tray out. I put a chicken feeder in here. And another thing about your cage is you want it to be metal. Wooden or plastic, they're probably going to chew it. I put a chicken feeder down in here and cut a hole in the front so it could fit down below there. So I don't know if you can see it well, but that's what we did for that part. And I just put that on the top to keep the feed dry. And then our access points on the top. So this is good for predators. So we have this, latch on the top. If it were a raccoon or something trying to get in, it would easily be able to get in if it was on the side, because if they're, little opposable thumbs, they can grab things and open them. But you just got to be careful. I had to come out here this morning and check them. The male got in with the female. So I really need to process this female soon, as well as the 3 males that I have from that litter, because she's probably pregnant. Even though she's only 4 months old, I've had it happen before. They will just have the baby on the grate and it'll just die, unfortunately. You really, you don't want to have kits until they're about 6 months old. Your females need to be about 6 months. And of course, you need to be ready for them to have babies. So I learned my lesson, just telling you guys what not to do when you have meat rabbits. But anyway, so if you guys have questions, drop them down below in the podcast. I will have show notes up on our website, so feel free to check those out. If I've mentioned, different resources, I'll also link some suggestions to books that you can purchase to read a little bit more about rabbit care, infrastructure ideas. Just this is the way that I've done it. You may find your own way. Just do what works for you. And if you have questions about things that I have not mentioned or neglected to put in here, please drop us a comment below. Guys, take a minute to like our YouTube channel and follow it, subscribe. Also, we're on Instagram, Facebook. Please follow us on those social media websites. And do not forget to subscribe to our farmsteadforum.com website email list, because we have exciting get-together announcements coming up. I am looking at doing a gathering potentially at the end of this summer for, instead of the conference this year, we're looking at doing a potluck with a keynote speaker. So more info on that. I will send out information, RSVP info from our website email list and on the social media as well. So don't forget to follow us on those platforms. And thank you guys so much for listening. And just let me know if you have any constructive criticism for this mobile podcast. It was my first time doing it. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.
Hey, thanks for listening. Join our Facebook group and follow us on Instagram for the latest updates. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website for upcoming events. For sponsorship opportunities, reach out to us through our website. See you next time.